All right. Hey, folks. So today we're going to be talking about making your best gains ever. I've summarized some of the broad overriding principles of when I made my best gains ever, and I've put them into this video for your benefit. See how you can apply them to your own training. So firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength and physique goals, there's a link in the description. Now, what I've done is I've looked back over about 4 occasions in my training life where I made really big jumps up in strength and size. And I've tried to summarize the commonalities of all 4 of those occasions to benefit you and how you can apply these to the next 6 months of your training. So let's get started. First thing is focus and progression. During the times I made the most progress, I was really enthusiastic about training. I loved it, you know. Not to the point where I love it now. I love training now. I love training is still one of the highlights of my day. But during those times, I was absolutely obsessed. Like every waking moment, I was thinking about adding more weight to the bar. I would extrapolate in my mind about how far ahead I'm going to be over the next 3 to 6 months. I was just really focused on progression. I was really excited about it. And I was excited about the entire process, the diet, the sleep, all that kind of stuff. And what I did over all 4 of those occasions was I would generally have 3 or so big exercises which served as my core markers of progression. For you OG guys of the channel, you'll know about my markers of progression. Generally throughout my training life, it's been the squat, bench, and deadlift, simply because I've mostly done powerlifting. But later on during bodybuilding, I also had core movements which were more bodybuilding oriented, like the hammer incline press and the pendulum squat, things like that, which I really focused on to try and get stronger with. So focus and progression. Not only was I obsessed with the actual training process, just in love with bodybuilding, but I was also, I'd narrowed my focus down to 3 big hitters, which were really, served as a really good gauge for whether my training was progressing or not. Like, for example, let's say we use the chin up, the weighted chin up. Like if I take my weighted chin up from body weight with 10 kilos to body weight with 40 kilos, all of you guys, do you realistically think my entire back and biceps aren't going to be bigger? Of course not, right? So that's kind of the principle that I used. And yes, you can write down everything, of course. We still track our training, but the focus is more on the big 3. I'm not necessarily as concerned about whether I'm moving up on the rear delt pec deck, you know, or whether I'm moving up on the cable curls. Like that's like pretty much irrelevant. If I'm getting bigger and stronger on chins, and let's say I've got a decent overall balanced level of development, my back and biceps are going to get bigger. If I'm getting bigger, if I'm getting stronger on the weighted dip, odds are my chest, shoulder, and triceps are going to get bigger. It just simplifies things. And we as human beings, we like simple concepts, particularly when motivation is high. Like, yes, we can get bogged down in the details about whether our incline line tricep extension is getting better or not, but focus on the big things. So first thing is focus on progression. Be passionate about what you're doing, the entire process, but also be really passionate about getting stronger on these markers of progression. Next thing is build up prior. This is super important. So this is one of those like practical tips, right? Before you really drop the hammer and add in calories and really focus on your sleep and really get engaged with the training, make sure you've built up to your maximum weights. Like let's say, for example, you want to have the incline dumbbell bench as your main pushing exercise for the next 6 months. And you want to take that up to using the 60s in each hand, okay? And right now you're using the 50s. What you want to do is you want to spend a month or 2 getting back to using the 60s. Let's say you're out of practice, right? Spend a month or 2 getting back to the 60s, okay? Well, that was your previous max. Yeah, I think that analogy is right. So let's say you get back to the 60s, right? And then you want to progress from there to the 70s or the 80s, whatever. So you want to do that build-up work prior to really dropping the hammer and really pushing ahead, because that build-up work is just regaining lost territory. It's not actually gaining. And I tend to think this is where a lot of people make the mistake and stay around the intermediate level. So let's say they focus on the bench press and they get their bench to 100 for 8. Cool, you know? And then another training cycle, they focus on the incline bench, which they've previously done 90 for 8. And so they build back up, they go to 90 for 8, then it starts to get hard and like, oof, maybe I'll go back to the bench, see how I do there. And so they start to build up again. They start at 90 for 8 and they build back up to 100 for 8. So they're always building up. They're always recycling the same poundages. They're never actually pushing ahead. And what I want to say here is I want to emphasize that the build up to your working weights, That's just the build-up. That might take 1 or 2 months if you're out of practice, but that's all it is. It's not really significantly building any muscle tissue. It's not, like, sorry to say, but that if you hadn't done the incline dumbbell bench for a few months and you're out of practice with it, and so you have to start low again, like, I'm sorry, dude, but you're not building significant amount of muscle tissue going back up to your previous working weights. Like, it's not the way it works. So to get from, say, what is your previous max to a new max, that is what will significantly build muscle tissue. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people fall into, because it's easy to fall into that mistake, because as soon as you get to your working weights, what happens? Well, it gets hard. So we start to think, oh, maybe I should change things around. Oh, that routine looks good. That routine looks good. Very few people have the mentality to say, you know what, I'm going to stick to this for 6 months, and I'm going to increase my food and my quality of sleep and my quality of nutrition to allow me to get into new poundage territory. That's how you really get bigger and stronger. You go from handling those 40s on the incline dumbbell bench, which is your best ever, to handling the 60s, right? Strong is as strong does. So the build up prior, that's the introduction. That the analogy for that would be like reading a forward for a book and then putting it down and go, yeah, I'm done now. Like, hold on, you didn't even read the book. You don't know what it's about. And I kind of get the feeling a lot of people are like that when it comes to weights. They just don't know what the weights are about. They just read the introduction and they continue to do that. So anyway, the build-up happens prior. It's not actual training. Next is understanding the rate of progress. So when you hit that point where you have built up, that's when progress really slows down. And again, I think this is why people mess up, because they don't understand that progress is slow. To build a level of muscle, which takes you from a 2 plates aside on the bench to 2.5 plates aside on the bench, that takes time. To build the chest, the shoulders and triceps, to handle that level of weight takes time. It's about it. It's at least a 6-month commitment. Like, imagine the musculature you need to go from, say, 100 for 8 is your maximum on the bench press, 100 kilos, to go to 120 for 8. That's a lot more muscle. You can't build that overnight. So understand that the actual rate of progress is very, very slow. And again, this is another reason that people get stuck at the intermediate stage, because beginner to intermediate is really fast progress. So they're like, great. They get used to it. They go, oh, I should be able to add 5 kilos to the bar every time. Well, then every time they get to that hard stage, they're not used to the work. They're not used to it going so slow. So they think, must be something wrong. Maybe I'll try a different routine. I've hit a plateau. That's a common one. Understand that the rate of progress is slow. So what I used to do when I was younger and I was in these gaining phases, I would try and extrapolate how far I could get ahead, right? So I would do all this mental like maths in my head and go, okay, I'm not going to be able to add 2.5 kilos per week, but I can probably add 2.5 kilos, maybe, I don't know, every couple of weeks. That's 5 kilos a month. So, okay, maybe if I do it right, then in 4 months, I can hit my goal, right? So that's kind of how I would think. But even then, I would give myself some contingency, some leeway, deload weeks, all that kind of stuff. So it's more like what we have on the screen here, 6 months. Okay, so that's how I work it out. And I would get excited about those numbers. I was like, yes, if I just try and stick to the progress of every 2 weeks, adding 2.5 kilos to the bar, that means in 6 months, I'll be that strong and I'll be that big. And I would get really excited about that. It sounds really sad, right? But I would love it. I would love it. It'd just be great. And I think I would extrapolate out to the future. I think, wow, I can do that. If I just nail every couple of weeks, nail that 2.5 kilos, then in 6 months, I'll have 20 kilos and I'll be that much closer to my goal. And by next year, I'll be at 40 kilos and I can just do that much better. I'll be that much bigger. And it's just how I would work it. But I understood the rates of progress. So I was, in my mind, it was more a case of, okay, I know full well how I'm going to get to my goal incrementally. And that was really exciting for me. And it almost always worked out. Understand your rate of progress and understand that this is the type of progress that will occur after you've done the build-up. And that's when it gets really fun and that's when it gets hard. And that's when nutrition and sleep become more important. Now, I want to also say, with regards to, I mentioned earlier about 3 core exercises, minimalism pretty much sucks. Like, don't do the least, okay? But what I will say is start with an amount of volume that allows you to get stronger. So let's say you're in the build-up phase, okay? You don't need much volume in the build-up phase. Once you get to the point where you're working with your maximum weights, evaluate your recovery. Like, are you recovering? Are you fresh as a daisy? And you're stalled? Then you need more volume. You know, you've heard me say this before, guys. If you're stalled and you're fresh as a daisy, add more. If you're stalled and you're sore and you're beat up, you're getting hurt, take away volume. Okay. So back up the rest of your routine with enough volume that one, you can continue to progress, and two, you can continue to work hard on your sets. Don't add in so much volume that it's all junk volume and you're just not working hard. There's no point in doing that. I don't advocate for junk volume. Volume for volume's sake is silly. We want enough volume to allow us to continue to progress. Remember, the end goal is progress. It's not just do a predetermined amount of volume. So on that note, throw out the window all of these preset ideas of what volume should be. I don't want to hear that kind of nonsense. Volume is just a tool. It's a lever that you use to get you to the end goal of getting stronger. That's all it's for. It allows you to get stronger. It allows you to work hard. Your volume shouldn't detract from that. So move away from these predetermined ideas, these set ideals of 10 to 20 sets. Start low and then do what you need to do to adjust it. I want to encourage people to have some agency over their volume. Control it, manipulate it properly. Don't just take somebody else's suggestion and go 10, 20, got to do that. It's not the way it works. All right. And next thing is, once you are in that gaining phase, once you've built up to the maximum weights and you've adjusted your volume, you've got to focus on nutrition and sleep. That's the next step to take you to the point, take you from the point where we'll go back to the example. You're benching, say, 100 kilos for 8. Take you to that point to the next level, which is 120 for 8. You are going to need to get significantly bigger. That's the only way it's going to happen. To do that, you need to be in a small surplus. You need to focus on quality food and you need to sleep restful every night. That's going to facilitate that progress. It's going to facilitate the entire process. So ensure that at that stage, especially when you drop, that's when you drop the hammer. And what that means is ensuring you're getting tip-top quality nutrition and quality sleep. So to summarize, how to make your best gains ever over the next 6 months. Firstly, pick a routine, pick 3 or so core exercises which you're going to use as your markers of progression and start to ramp up to your best ever working weights. Your best ever working weights, all right? So get to that point, and at that stage, that is when you start to, one, really slow things down. Your rate of expectation should be a lot slower. You should be looking at something like, as I say, 20 or so kilos over the next 6 months of actual progress. Really slow it down and think about what's possible to do over the course of the next 6 months, not the next 6 weeks or the next 2 weeks. Think what's possible over the next 6 months. Slow down the rate of progression, slow down to your expectation, and then that's when you really add in, make sure you're in a good solid surplus every day. Make sure your quality of nutrition is good, your protein is nice, you're eating some good foods. And good nutrition most of the time is about real food. It's not about supplementation. Make sure that's on point. And on top of that, stay passionate and stay patient. All right, folks, I'm going to call it there. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And as I say, if you want to work with me on creating your own best 6 months, then get in touch. The link below. Take care.